Our next presenter would be Maka. I can't say his last name, so don't ask me to. He is also the network penetration tester, and he is what I have been told is the lab manager. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but it sounds important, so I decided to throw that in here. And Robert Hyam, he is the he is the tallest. There you go. He is the tallest one. He is also the compatibility lead for threat hunting. I've been kind of given a short explanation of he is the hunter and the rest of the gatherers. So let me pass it over to the State Farm team with their speech, Spy versus Spy, creating threat hunting use cases for out of red team exercises. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much. First of all, thanks everybody for joining us today. I know there is a lot of cool sessions happening, right next door, and Derbycon is streaming live, and we really appreciate you showing up. So, in the introduction, my name is Anthony Abraham. I'm part of State Farm's 600 plus members of the information security program. And my job, like she said, I'm the offensive security manager. What we are here to talk about today is how offensive security and defensive security is very complementary in creating a complete security program. So a little bit of backstory from me. I am a network defender to the very bone. Grew up there, being a network security analyst, being a security architect. And I hope, I actually didn't, but I hope I learned this lesson early in my life. To be able to defend well, you need to understand offense. You need to understand how attackers think and operate to be able to make it hard for them to break into your organizations. So hopefully that's what we'll cover for you today. We have Robert from our Cybersecurity Defense Center, what we call CSDC. That's where we coordinate all of our defense activities. That's where we do threat intel, threat hunting, incident response, forensics, and all of those cool defense things. And we have Tony and Maka here. They both, they have the coolest job in my opinion. They get paid to break into things. So what we are here to talk about is how threat hunting is informed by red teaming or offensive security activities, and how does the teams come together to complete your security program and make it hard for the bad guys to breach into your network. The thing about it, if you are breached by the real bad guys out there, you don't have an opportunity to sit down with them and ask about, Mr. Hacker or Miss Hacker, exactly how did you break into my network? Or can you jump on a call and consult with us? You don't have that opportunity. But with an internal team, you do. That's what we want to talk about, and hopefully that is the takeaway for you as well, is how would you leverage your offensive security and defensive security practices together to make it hard for the bad guys. And that's why we exist, right? Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Robert to take it away.
So one quick correction. I think I have the coolest job, and then one other real quick favor. I have teenagers, so I'm going to do something. All right, so quick poll. How many students do we have in your show, please? How many people have heard of threat hunting? Okay, and now how many people have heard of threat hunting, had heard of threat hunting greater than 5 years ago? Okay, so it has existed, but in small pockets. It's gaining popularity, I'll talk about why. And it's gaining momentum as a vital capability within your cybersecurity program. So in a nutshell, think of threat hunting as proactive incident response. Instead of buying a device or a piece of software, adding some rules, configuring it to trip on alerts of adversaries and things, and going and investigating it. Threat hunters have to make educated guesses. You'll see the word hypotheses later on where on the network an adversary might be and what they might be doing. And that's why, that's the proactive part. Now to understand the problem, can we move to the next slide? To understand the problem that threat hunting solves, we have to talk about a thing called dwell time. So dwell time in a nutshell is the time between when an adversary first exploits a vulnerability on a network to the time that they're discovered. All right? According to the most recent Verizon breach report, over 68% of breaches took longer than 30 days to detect. They had a 30-day or longer dwell time. If you think Equifax, Target, Home Depot, etc., a lot of those were greater than 200 days. They didn't even know that they were breached until a law enforcement agency or a customer or someone told them, hey, this is the data that you own from me, and it's out on the internet, right? Or I've got, I'm being targeted, whatever, identity theft, etc. So the problem that threat hunting seeks to solve is a reduction in that dwell time. And another problem it helps solve is, along with the dwell time, the reason why the dwell times, I believe, are long, this is my speculation. I believe dwell times are so long because if you think about the traditional reactive approach to threat response, those are based on vendor products largely, right? So those same vendor products are installed across thousands, hundreds of thousands of devices. The bad guys have them. They can test all of their TTPs on them before they even try to get it on your network. And Mark and Tony will talk about recon and exploit development, et cetera, weaponization. But it's these software pieces, these things that you're relying on to find bad guys, the bad guys have their hands on. And again, they're not custom to your environment. They are configured to try to have like an equal false positive versus false negative. They don't. If they gave you the software and hardware configured to find to alert on every possible thing that might be weird on a network, you would have to tune it down. Out of the box, it would just be crazy, right? So those are the problems I think that threat hunting solves. Is it helps you create custom solutions for detection within your environment, with the ultimate goal of trying to reduce that dwell time. So what do you need in order to start threat hunting within your environment? And who should threat hunt? I think, in my opinion, everyone should threat hunt. Now, it should be especially starting off, it should be a very small percentage of your time relative to your existing controls, detective controls, your reactive level controls. But for one reason, you have to have an instant response. If you start threat hunting and find things, and you don't have a program for responding and remediating those issues already, you're going to find out real quick you need to build one. So instant response must have. Nice to have centralized data. Threat hunting is very data centric. It's human driven, machine assisted, data centric. Okay, so having data available to search through in a centralized place makes your job a lot easier. A lot of times you're going to be baselining to find anomalous behavior. You're going to have to baseline what normal behavior is and what data you have to assist you. And then what makes a good threat hunter? Three main characteristics. One, advanced knowledge of attacker TTPs. Red team members make great threat hunters. Situational awareness. Knowing when you're investigating or looking for anomalous traffic, already having an idea of where on the network, how your network's segmented, what's normal traffic, because you've investigated anomalous things, figured out what's not normal before, not normal before. Incident responders make great threat hunters. And then finally, like I said, you're going to be data centric, so the ability to analyze data. So some familiarity with some data analytic tools, data analytic techniques is going to go a long way towards helping you with your threat hunting. All right, so you've decided to start threat hunting. How do you do it? You have a resource, time dedicated to threat hunting. How do you do it, right? Step one, identify the likely targets that your adversaries are going to be targeting within your environment. I kind of categorize them in two categories. One, the internet exposed. So if the asset has the ability to go out to the internet, surf the internet, download malware, if the asset receives email that it can click on, install malware, likely target. The other targets are your critical assets, your high value targets. If you're in the energy sector and the threat you're worrying about is taking down the grid, those things that control the grid, those are their high value targets. If you're a healthcare, financial services, etc., your likely target or your high value assets are the ones that contain the social security numbers, medical data, etc. All right, and so you'll identify SQL data. I have a SQL database that has this information on it, it's behind this firewall, etc. And now you threat model. You try to figure out, you create your attack trees. If I was an adversary and I targeted this particular asset, what tactic, techniques, and procedures are available to me to exploit vulnerabilities, or what vulnerabilities exist based on those particular assets. From there, you sit down with your control owners, the other members of the security department, etc., and you try to determine where you currently have gaps in your ability to detect. Blend all those things together and you have a good recipe to begin your threat hunting. So you can't throw a rock at a threat hunting presentation or article without seeing at least one of these three references, right? The first one I'm going to talk about, I've said TTPs quite a bit, so let's talk about, and I need to say IOCs, right? Indicators of compromise. Something that tells you that the bad guy is on your network that you can key in on. The pyramid of pain was developed to kind of depict that not all IOCs are created equal. What I mean by that is, if I have a command and control infrastructure and you have the IP address of that command and control infrastructure, you add that IP address to your firewall, I change my IP address, your control no longer works. You can't detect that anymore, you have to retool. Move all, and the same thing for domain names, hash values of malware, tool names, network artifacts like user agent strings, etc. If I move up to the TTP level and I say, I know this adversary uses command and control over HTTP and it beacons every 3 minutes. If I look, or beacons at all, if I go out and filter out the legitimate things that beacon on your network, like content delivery networks, social media sites, things asking for patches and updates, move all that to the side, now I'm left with a custom solution for detecting HTTP command and control traffic within my environment. And the adversary has to change the way that they're beaconing, or else, same thing with lateral movement for RDP. If you go out and you turn off RDP, now I have to figure out a whole new way to laterally move across your environment. So those are the TTPs. When we talk about TTPs, I'm sure everyone in the security community has at least heard of MITRE. MITRE publishes attack framework, attacker tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. Speaking of RDP, if I wanted to go and find out what lateral movement through RDP looked like, first stop would be MITRE. So if you go open up, it's a cross-reference in a matrix, it'll say lateral movement, and then underneath it, it'll say RDP. Click on that, such good information. It'll tell you what data you need to gather that might show you lateral movement through RDP. It'll tell you what it actually is. It'll give you a good description of it. It will tell you, it even gives you hints at how to analyze that data in order to find lateral movement. And to help prioritize what you want to threat hunt for, it actually lists all of the APT, Advanced Persistent Threat Groups, or threat actors who have used those in the past. So if you, with your threat intel group, decide that oil rig, you're mainly concerned about oil rig, you can cross-reference oil rig and you have a heat map of TTPs used by oil rig when you're targeting your organization. So now you've got an idea of the TTP that you want to look for, you've gone out, you've researched, you figured out what your control gaps are, you got an idea, you hypothesize. I hypothesize that there are people on my network laterally moving through RDP. So I know what data I need to go gather. I've got an idea of how to analyze that data with the tools and techniques. I look for patterns, legitimate uses of RDP versus like whether it's during certain hours, whether it's from certain machines, through certain machines. I can develop, again, a custom solution for understanding what's might be weird, suspicious, possibly malicious on the network through RDP. Now, and if you happen to find malicious use of RDP, now you have other IOCs you can add to your existing tools. And you've learned a lot about your environment. So that, in a nutshell, that's kind of what threat hunting is, how it fits in an organization, what you need to do it, and the process involved in some tools. I'm going to hand it over to the red team to kind of give you a similar overview of what they do.
Thanks, Robert. So now that we know, you have a basic understanding of what threat hunting is and the value that it brings to an organization, I just want to speak on what red teaming is, the value that it'll bring to the organization, and then Mako will provide some example attacks using the Lockheed Martin attack kill chain, which you'll notice is similar to what Robert just touched on with the threat modeling. Excuse me. So when I say threat red team, what I want you to think is just a group of offensive focused cybersecurity professionals who simulate actual adversaries using real world tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, to simulate attacks against an organization. And the value that this brings from an organizational standpoint is that it allows you to identify risks related to the people, process, and technology, as well as a red team will provide some potential remediation options for filling those control gaps. So now that we know what a red team is and the value that it brings to an organization, I just want to touch on some things that you'll need to have in place in order to have a red team be successful. The first of these is you need to have people who are technically competent and have experience across just information technology as a whole. Red teaming is not something that's entry level, so you'll need people who have a good skill set and diversified skills across broad ranges to be able to be successful. You'll also need to ensure that the red team is able to operate without any sort of arbitrary restrictions, and this is due to the fact that attackers aren't operating under these restrictions. And then finally, you'll also need to have a process in place to be able to ingest and digest that data that is coming out as a result of the red team efforts, to be able to act on that data and actually make it actionable to go during the remediation piece. So now that we know what a red team is, the value that it brings to an organization, and how it fits into an organization, I just want to touch on some things to keep in mind as you're planning a red team assessment. The first of these is you need to make sure that you have clearly identified your objectives for the assessment. You also need to clearly identify the threat scenario, and this can be customized to whatever industry you're operating in. As Robert will touch on, he'll give an example of an attack for a specific industry. And then finally, you also need to stay up to date on recent threat actor TTPs, just to ensure that you're testing using the most up-to-date attacks that are out there. One other thing to keep in mind is that you need to make sure that the objectives, the threat scenario, and the threat actor TTPs, that those are clearly defined, because as Robert touched on, that work is going to be fed into as input into the threat hunting efforts. They're going to be leveraging the work that red team has already done, their due diligence, and using that during their scenarios and their work effort. So that's just a quick overview of what a red team is, the value it provides, how it fits into an organization, and now Mark is going to touch on some example attacks using the Lockheed Martin kill chain.
Thanks, John. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to walk you through the kill chain. The Lockheed Martin kill chain is basically visualization of the phases of an engagement and the actions that are taken during that engagement. If we think back to the framework slide, showed the monitor attack framework, and this maps to that, so when we provide our deliverable, they can then map our actions to the monitor attack framework as well. So the offensive and defensive arms are often viewed as being in competition, but we're very much on the same side and working towards the same goal. And the value of red teaming comes in that it allows training for the blue team. So I'll start with the very first one, which is reconnaissance. And this is basically the gathering of information. So this would be your OSINT, where you're gathering open source information from sources such as Google and LinkedIn. So for some examples, you can check job listing sites. So you can check job listing sites, and from these you will find job postings for infrastructure-specific clues that might give you an idea of what might be running inside a target network. So for instance, if you find job postings for a F5 engineer, you might have a rough idea of what exactly is running in that network. You can also search social networks, and from these you will be able to start to do some reconnaissance on potential targets for social engineering. And another source of information is breach dumps. So from these, you'll be able to get information such as valid email addresses that you can use for phishing, and additional information that might give you a layout of what is inside that network. At this point, you want to start creating a pretext, and this is where you start creating a backstory for when you actually initiate contact with someone within that organization. So for instance, if your target is company X, you can then say that you are a potential customer of company X and you would like to start service with them. And this is very key to your success in that creating this relationship and building trust increases the chances that your attacks will be successful. So once you actually initiate contact, if we were to take an actual example, you can email someone within that organization and begin a conversation and build trust based off of the information that you gather. The next phase would be weaponization, and this would be creating actual malicious backdoors or exploits that you will use to gain access to this network. And some examples of these are, so what you can do is create a link to a site that you own, which you will then direct a target to. You can also craft actual executable binaries that they might run. And another one would be something like creating macro-enabled documents that you would send via email to them. So to continue with our example, take a macro-enabled document. That will be the actual payload that we're going to deliver to them. And during this phase, we'll also want to begin to map out what their network might look like and start to plan your attack accordingly. You'll also want to start to think about things such as the potential security controls that you might run into. So as I mentioned, if you know that they have job listings for F5 engineers, for instance, you would then be able to look up ways to bypass those particular security controls as you're building your exploits. The next phase would be the delivery phase. And if we're to continue with the example I was giving of a macro-enabled document, this could be an email attachment, or alternatively, it could also be a hosted executable on the site that you create. It could also be embedded code that you can inject into legitimate executables that you might have access to. And again, during this delivery phase, again, the relationship that you build during the reconnaissance phase with the target, again, increases your chances of success. If we go back to the perimeter pane, it mentions hash values and the signatures that can be generated off of common payloads. As Robert mentioned about dwell time, if you're able to craft your exploits with custom code, this would increase that dwell time and would make it more difficult for things like antivirus to detect whatever exploit you're sending to your target. as these signatures will probably be in places like VirusTotal, and it will be easy for antivirus to detect. The next phase will be the exploitation phase. And this is basically, the goal of this is to gain remote access or code execution within that network. So basically this is where the code or the exploit that you deliver runs. And in this case, this would be your target opening and running the macro-enabled document. And a good thing to remember is your code doesn't necessarily have to be very sophisticated. A lot of the time, we think that it has to be some sort of zero-day, but to a great degree, because of the relationship that you've built, you are also exploiting the user, and it's not just software or technically related. If we move forward to the next stage, that will be installation. So this is where the malware that you delivered actually creates a backdoor on the system, or it takes advantage of misconfigured services. And the goal here would be to have a connection back to the attacker, or in our case, to an IP that we control, for instance. You can also leverage things such as functionality that already exists within the operating system. So like scheduled tasks in Windows, Cron, and Linux. You can also take advantage of some misconfigured services as well. Again, with this piece, custom code is king, as that, again, makes it more difficult to detect the presence of an attacker within that network. The next phase would be command and control. So if we think of some examples like botnets, these typically take advantage of things like IoT devices. So if you think of like IP cameras or Nest devices that are generally architected without security in mind. So if an attacker is able to compromise a lot of these and install something that will allow them to connect to and control these devices en masse, that can allow them to utilize these devices for distributed denial of service attacks, for instance. And the goal of this is basically just to create a persistent channel from which you can control machines within this network. It also needs a medium that is hard to detect. So again, I'll come back to custom code being king. Here, you can utilize things like custom encryption, and also a more popular method that's been used is to use existing forms of transport that aren't usually inspected, like DNS traffic or outgoing web responses, to as your channel for command and control. And then at this point, we'll go to actions on objectives. So this is where you'll actually want to take action on the objectives that you had for this particular target. So here you want to perform things like data exfiltration. This is where an attacker would actually steal credit card numbers or social security numbers. You may want to also install a ransomware, and attackers will then demand payment to have it removed or to decrypt your data. You may also want to start to pivot within that environment. So this is where you would further compromise other machines and see if you can get into additional sub-networks within your target network. Malicious attackers will also then destroy data at this point. And on to the next piece. So once this is complete, as an attacker, your objective is more or less met. And from our standpoint, this is where we will then furnish our deliverable to the owners of the product. And also this deliverable also goes to blue teams. And where this becomes valuable is it helps blue teams actually differentiate from what is fact and what's fiction. So as opposed to them having a theoretical idea of what an attacker might do, they have an actual kill chain of a legitimate attack vector that can be used to get from point A outside of your network to point B inside the network. At this point, I'm going to let Robert come back and let you know how this is useful from a data hunting perspective.
took a couple of notes real quick while Michael was talking and Tony. Things I wanted to highlight. One, spy versus spy. I mean, hopefully you're starting to see that the title, it's not really the red team versus the blue team here. It's the red team and the blue team against the people outside the organization trying to get in, right? So humans are looking for clever ways around controls. So humans need to also be doing that. So, you know, that's kind of the inspiration behind the title of the slide. Not all red team results are threat hunting material, right? So you do need to work with, we're just one of the teams that consume when the pen testing red team vulnerability teams deliver their results. We're just one of the consumers that are trying to figure out what to do next about it. If there's something that can be quickly implemented by a control owner or a rule in your SEN product, you want to know about that so you can cross it off the list and start to whittle down. Because I mean, folks, 0 days are not your main concern, right? If you look at the breach reports, you'll see a common theme. Misconfigurations, you'll see things that because the business needs them. Macro-enabled, you mentioned macro-enabled documents. I mean, there's legitimate uses within corporations for macro-enabled documents, so people are going to take advantage of that for malicious use. So anyway, another thing this is where we kind of tie it together. Hopefully you're seeing, the red team did a lot of our heavy lifting for us, for their threat hunt team. When we talked earlier about how to threat hunt, we said identify likely targets. They've got onto the piece of malware onto an end workstation, all the way to now they're doing actions on objectives, exfiltrating sensitive data. They've done all the threat modeling because they got in. You know, assuming they got in, which I'm gonna lie and say they never get in, but we all know the truth. They've done the threat modeling for the devices. They've determined the control gaps. They're not theoretical anymore. They prove that we have gaps in our ability to detect or prevent things from happening. So you start, like I said, a lot of the heavy lifting has been done for you. You start immediately creating your use cases. And as a bonus, assuming, again, going back to the need for collecting data, they've left traces in your HTTP data, they've left traces on your workstations, your processes. That's now empirical, right? You can shape your hypotheses, write your logic, gather your data, and apply it to the time frames that they were in, and now you know if your tools actually work or not. All right, so real quick, I want to leave some time for questioning. We're going to go through a couple examples. I'm going to ask Anthony to go back to the kill chain. So I'm not going to obviously our dirty laundry. I will instead use a campaign targeting Middle Eastern companies. It's the APT they talk about, and maybe this is relevant. Maybe some of you have interests in financial institutions in the Middle East. There's a APT, a threat actor called Oil Rig, and one of their latest campaigns uses a piece of malware called Oops.IE or Oopsie, I don't know. Palo Alto did a really good write-up on it if you want to look at it. But the way it works, the reconnaissance piece it's important but not important as far as threat hunting is concerned. They went on job sites, whatever, looked at companies' web pages, gathered some email addresses, they weaponized a macro-enabled document, delivered it through an email, through a phishing campaign, and somebody clicked on it. Here's where threat hunting kicks in, right? So threat hunting is post-exploitation, assumed breach. We're assuming that there's somebody on our network, and because somebody's clicked on something they shouldn't have, and they're now trying to laterally move, etc. So the first thing the macro does is it unpacks a VB script. The VB script creates a command and control client and a scheduled task. The scheduled task calls the command and control client every 3 minutes over HTTP. The command and control client piece of malware calls out, says, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? It says, run some local commands to figure out how many devices are on that network. Do some pings, do some net SHs, do some, run some things to kind of enumerate the device on the network, or take everything out of my documents folder and encrypt it and send it to me, whatever, right? So that's kind of the stages of, that's how that OopsIE malware works, according to kill chain. So go back to the last slide again. This slide, sorry. No, that might have been. Okay, so step one, macro enabled documents. Go out to, first step, again, go out to MITRE. Look for macro, TTPs using macro enabled documents. You'll see boilerplate listed right there on that particular page. It will tell you, gather process execution data, command parameter data. So you'll do that, and for this particular one, you look for winword.exe, calling command.exe, but I wouldn't stop there. I would look for everything winword.exe calls, instantiates, and then run some data, do some frequency analysis, look for your anomalies, your low frequency occurrence events for winword calling things, and start investigating them. Start whitelisting all the things that are legitimate, investigate anything that doesn't, or investigate everything, whitelist things that are legitimate, report anything that's not legitimate, share your results with your control teams. Maybe they can isolate the use of winword.exe and an endpoint protection rule, whatever. But at the end of the day, you can automate that solution to now report on things that are anomalous uses of winword.exe. From there, we'll talk about scheduled tasks. Again, MITRE. Go to MITRE. There's a scheduled task category, persistence, execution. Go gather your scheduled tasks. WMI, PowerShell invoke. Use some tool, or maybe you already have those details in your Windows event logs in your SIM. Gather that, MITRE will tell you, gather that data. Again, start performing analysis on it. Look for things that are legitimate, look for things that stand out. Build a tool to now detect any anomalous use of scheduled tasks in your environment. It calls that executable, which there are ways to gather all the binaries, hash the binaries. It's a little bit more advanced, but you can start gathering all the binaries, build an inventory of what's legitimate hashes on your network, start investigating anomalies there. The executable calls out to a command and control server, right? It beacons every 3 minutes from the scheduled task. Open up your HTTP proxy logs, and again, MITRE has a category for command and control and data exfiltration over command and control. And they'll tell you, gather your HTTP proxy or your Bro network, the web logs, whatever. Start looking for frequency, do frequency analysis. You can visualize these things on a graph, and you can look for evidence of things from a machine, one machine inside your network to a machine outside your network, looking to the same site as a frequency of every 3 minutes. Even if they changed it to do randomization, you can do frequency analysis on the size of the payload. So remember, a command and control malware, its main goal is to get commands to run, right? So it's going to say, hey, what do you want me to do? Hey, what do you want me to do? Hey, what do you want me to do? Those are going to be very consistent requests, size, byte sizes. So you can also start looking at, that's another good threat hunting use case, right? So hopefully what you're seeing is, I refer back to the problem that threat hunting solves, right? Hopefully we're reducing dwell time because we're building custom solutions to find things on our network that our existing solutions can't find, and we're finding them at the TTP level instead of an adversary changing their IP address, and now we lose sight of them or control of them. We can look for patterns investigated. Next slide. I added a couple papers to the slide. Lockheed Martin and MITRE. These articles do a good job of kind of explaining in much greater detail what we kind of went through today, using your red team. It talks about purple teaming, which is like a red blue team coordinated efforts within your environment. The Lockheed Martin is about breaking your threat intelligence and using diamond model intrusion analysis, bucketing it into the infrastructure, the capabilities, the adversaries, etc., and then using that to then inform your cybersecurity program. I'm going to hand it back to Anthony now. I think we have some time for some questions.
Thank you, Robert. Actually, you do have the full slide. I'm jealous. We got 6 minutes for any questions, and we have all of these experts here to answer any questions you may have. So the question was, how does red team and blue team sort of work together? Are there disagreements in terms of the techniques or the tactics and all those things? I'll Tony or Mark, if you guys want to take it.
I guess there are often disagreements, and I think the crux of it is that we're both kind of trying to get to a certain place. I think at the end of the day, we all realize that we're working to the same goal. So we can usually come to some common ground with the idea that we are all trying to make the organization better at the end of the day.
So I think this goes back to what the keynote speaker touched on at the beginning of today's session, where he said that a lot of the disagreements come from the perspective that you're looking at. So red team, we're looking at the offensive side. So obviously we have a different perspective from the blue team who's doing defending. So I think the key piece there is you just need to be able to communicate why you feel that way, where you're coming from, as well as the blue team. They need to communicate why they feel a certain way. And usually that helps to resolve a lot of the conflict, to be able to come to an agreement that may be somewhere in the middle, or it may be, red team was actually right or blue team was actually right. But I think it's just that communication and that perspective of seeing, this is why they feel that way.
So one another thing we try to do is to bring these two teams together against potentially an external adversary, somebody who might come in and attack us, and these two teams work together to defend against that group. That's another way we build the camaraderie. Question?
Just want to check in to see if that data reports from the vulnerability scan for the management team, validate some of the critical findings.
So it's an interesting question. So typically when we do a pen test type activity, we might look at that kind of data. But when we do a red team activity, we prefer to do that from a black box perspective. We don't want to give them any inside information. They have to gain this access from the outside, just like the real bad guys who are not there, right? Otherwise, probably the blue team will disagree. Say, hey, that's cheating if you give that type of insights. But pen test, typically we start from a point of compromise. Assume breach, assume they're already in. And now, leverage everything that you have available to discover maximum number of vulnerabilities. But in terms of red team, we are trying to mimic a true external adversary. It's typically start from a point of no access and come in and discover that on your own. Could you compromise the vulnerability database system and then leverage that info? But no cheating or no gates lifted for you unless you wave a white flag of surrender and say, hey, we need help. Then we would lift those gates. Okay. And I'll come to you after that. Okay. All right. I'll go to him. Back to you. Okay. That's good.
I had a bit of a general question for red teaming. Is there a particular operating system or tools that you guys would prefer to use, or is it kind of a variety of it, like Kali Linux, Burp Suite and all, or do you all have one set one?
So I'll start to answer that and let the team pitch in. So we use a lot of open source. Okay. Yeah, sure, we'll be there. So we use Kali and a lot of open source tools. We write a lot of custom tools for our own use, and Marka was insisting upon that point. Custom makes it really difficult. And otherwise, Kali, Burp, all of those things you talked about, we use that. Yeah, I think we are pretty much out of time, and you had a question. I'll talk to you after this. All right, come see us at the booth.